are talking Obsidian Heart, aka Demon Hunter, from 2012. This one is directed by Rennie Perez. Perez is actually one of my kind of guilty pleasure favourite movie directors. He produces a lot of lower budget kind of B movies that have some critical issues, but I kind of enjoy the majority of them for cheesy fun. And this is one I hadn't seen. I thought I would try and maybe kind of catch up on some of the kind of the movies I had yet to see from kind of directors that I quite enjoy, and this was one of them. So what is the story of Obsidian Hearts? Well, there isn't much of a story if we're being completely honest. It focuses on primarily two characters. We have this woman who has been cursed for reasons that she ultimately attracts evil, primarily from demons, but it could be any type of evil, from serial killers to ghosts. It could be anything. And you know, she's essentially constantly on the run, and she has this partner called Klaus, who is a demon hunter, a large Austrian guy in the kind of clearly the mould of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has appeared, both these actors have actually appeared in other Perez movies, and he's essentially, you know, just kind of there to protect her, and they are trying to put an end to the curse and ultimately defeat the evil. That's your kind of your plot. So let's talk about what I think works in this movie. Now, I have to say, I'm actually quite a fan of Rennie Perez's work, even though I know that it's not always, or not very often, critically and particularly kind of strong. I still have a level of enjoyment for it. But this one, I have to be honest with you, is certainly at the bottom of the barrel. But there are a couple of things that I will say you can arguably put in the kind of the plus column. Perez's big strength for me is his, you know, eye for cinematography and his kind of just the way he kind of moves the kind of like the camera and his direction of his of those kind of his camera team and things like that. You know, he really does know how to film things in kind of a cinematic experience, and it has a really kind of good use of the natural environment. A lot of his movies, in fact, you know, probably most of his films are probably filmed in the same kind of location, but you know, we have these kind of like these, you know, this dense kind of forestry area. Everything is kind of very kind of bright and kind of oversaturated, which gives Perez's movies a kind of you know, feel, a look to them, which I kind of quite like. And when you have a horror element, it's a little different feeling to the kind of obviously the dark kind of misty kind of like woods that you may have seen. And so we have these kind of brightly lit but kind of quite kind of dense forests and things like that. So, you know, visually speaking, I think this movie is well photographed. We also have a little bit of kind of variety in antagonists. We not only have kind of demons, we have ghosts, we have kind of like mercenaries. So there's lots of kind of reasons for our duo to have these kind of action sequences with a kind of variety of you know, antagonists. Plus the movie does try and change up to the locations. As I've mentioned, we have these kind of these forests, but we also have, you know, urban areas. We have like an old west kind of like theme town, things like this. So there is a little bit of variety in our kind of you know, our locations, and there is lots of action. But let's now transition to what doesn't work. So this is a 2012 movie, an earlier film, and some of the complaints that I have with Perez's later films, you know, it's clear that he hasn't changed that much as a filmmaker. Because some of the kind of the issues are the same in 2022 than they are in 2012. For example, the actual action sequences are quite dull. As much as I like the actual kind of cinematography, and I think it captures a lot of the kind of the you know, the environment, and it's kind of well shot and things like that, lots of kind of like wide angle shots. The actual choreography of his fight scenes are quite dull. You know, we literally have kind of just no-name characters, you know, generic kind of like vanilla kind of bad guys, just tromping around the woods, you know, in boring kind of shootouts where they're kind of standing out in the open, no attempt at really finding cover or kind of being tactical, and it's just like these elongated gunfights that just seem to go on forever and are not particularly kind of exciting. and they're just ultimately quite dull, despite the fact there is quite a lot of them. The actual effect in regards to the kind of the demonic side of stuff, here's the problem with having your movies kind of in a very kind of like well-lit environment, is that these kind of creatures look a little bit lame. You know, there have been kind of movies where I thought some of the makeup was better. This one, it just looks like a bunch of people with masks, and because obviously the movie's taking place primarily in broad daylight under very kind of sunny conditions, it really emphasises the fact that it's just kind of like people running around in hokey masks. It doesn't look particularly kind of strong. What's the worst? Well, one of the kind of the major issues here is characterization. Nah, don't worry about that. It kind of goes. The movie launches with a kind of an action sequence and doesn't bother to have any real kind of characterization of our two kind of main leads. It just kind of gets straight in there. Oh, these are meant to be our good guys. Don't worry about any kind of backstory or kind of setup. We'll just kind of get straight into it, and we're meant to kind of like root for these people without really kind of knowing who they are, what their kind of modus operandi is, and things like this. And as the movie progresses, it tries to give us a little bit of kind of backstory, mainly through exposition, I have to say, with our female lead having a kind of a narration, a voiceover, essentially just telling you the information about, oh, I'm cursed, I don't know why I'm cursed, it just happened. Brilliant. So we get really kind of no kind of characterization in the film, and as the film progresses, you know, the acting isn't brilliant. The writing for the characters is poor. We get no real depth to their character. Klaus is like, you know, like he basically, you may as well be carrying around like a cardboard cutout. You know, it's just really kind of like zero character work in these movies. And again, that's true with a lot of Perez's films. I do think he has a good visual style. It's lacking a little bit in this movie, I will say. I think, you know, some of his other films, but even I reviewed Legend of Halls, which was a recent one, a 2022 one, and that was quite poor, if I'm honest. But there have been some movies that I've enjoyed. The Playing with Dolls series, I suspect, is probably the thing that most people will know. Rennie Perez probably seems to be his most popular kind of franchise. But he's done some movies which I do still enjoy, and even though I've enjoyed, you know, I can critically say some of these movies aren't particularly strong, I still have an enjoyment of them. This one lacks that kind of fun factor. This one was actually dull. You know, it didn't really have that, you know, guilty pleasure feel that I think some of these other movies do have. This one was just kind of dull, with kind of uninteresting characters, uninteresting bad guys, really not a lot of plot. Not a lot of plot. It's just two people running around from one situation to the next, avoiding some vanilla kind of bad guys. That's basically it. Perez has got a great visual style, but he needs to have to work off someone else's script that has a little bit more kind of going on, and maybe have producers that will push back on some of his more, you know, bad tendencies that he sometimes has, and, you know, have other people choreograph fight scenes. Perez has got talent, but, you know, he needs to be tempered for sure. This one was a dull movie. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10, which I actually think is quite generous, to be honest. So 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What do you think of Perez's work? If you're familiar with it, leave me a comment and I'll look forward to you next time. Bye for now.